Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the brand new North Carolina Sports Network and this new look version of the David Glenn Show. Thank you very much for being with us here in late July as we get closer and closer to football season, and soon after that, the return of many of our other favorite sports. With that in mind, some quick announcements about future editions of this show, now in YouTube and podcast forms. One of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, Duke's Mike Krzyzewski, will be among our guests one-on-one right here in August. Yet another Hall of Fame coach, Roy Williams of the University of North Carolina, will be a featured guest on another upcoming show. North Carolina's Governor, Roy Cooper, a huge Caniac, as Trip Tracy might say, and a big-time sports fan otherwise, also hopes to join the David Glenn Show in the month of August. We will be talking sports with Governor Cooper, of course, not politics. Carolina Panthers legend Julius Peppers from Southern Nash High School in Little Bailey, North Carolina, and a two-sport athlete at Carolina before becoming a dominant defensive end for the Panthers and others in the NFL, also will be joining a future edition of the program, as will our good friend and North Carolina Central University basketball coach Lavelle Moten, who's not only an amazing story as a former athlete and an incredibly successful D1 coach with the Eagles, he's a truly inspiring member of multiple communities right here in North Carolina. Pep, by the way, Julius Peppers, not the most talkative guy during his playing career, but in retirement, he's more accessible and having more fun sharing his stories. He is on his way into the Carolina Panthers Ring of Honor, as they announced just recently. All of these prominent guests, plus our recent and very personal 30-minute visits with Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour and NC State basketball legend Chris Corchiani, are very good reasons to remember to click the subscribe button here at our YouTube channel or on our podcast. As I've mentioned previously, we got to 500 subscribers in the blink of an eye, and we thank you for that. Not easy to do, but we need to get to 1,000 subscribers and well beyond that to take this grassroots media enterprise where we want to go. So we really need your contribution in that regard. Remember, it is easy to subscribe and it is free. Just click subscribe and voila, there it is. We're on our way to 1,000. And with that in mind, we will be selecting more winners for Panthers tickets, Hornets tickets, Hurricanes tickets, Charlotte FC soccer tickets, North Carolina Courage soccer tickets, concert tickets, as recent Wilmington area winners selected. Free golf vouchers, free dinners at amazing restaurants across North Carolina, including King Neptune in Wrightsville Beach. Other cool items are all over the DG Prize Closet. Just remember, you must be a subscriber to the YouTube channel or podcast to win. If you win, you get your choice among those prizes. It's not like we give Panthers tickets away one week and Hurricanes tickets another month or whatever. You win, you get your pick from among those prizes. And of course, if your pick isn't in season yet, we will deliver those goods when your favorite team becomes in season. Today, we have basketball on our minds. We have football on our minds. And we even have international sports on our minds. Basketball, because among other things, Michael Jordan, the GOAT himself, from Wilmington Laney High School and the UNC Tar Heels, and the longtime majority owner of the NBA's Charlotte Hornets right here in our backyard, Michael is back in the headlines and even in a different way on your movie screens this summer. If you haven't seen the movie Air with Ben Affleck as Nike founder Phil Knight and Matt Damon as the athletic shoe marketing guru Sonny Vaccaro, and Viola Davis as Michael's amazing mother Dolores, who helped negotiate arguably the greatest sports marketing deal in history, I highly recommend that movie. MJ himself actually had a lot of input in the movie, and Viola Davis played his mother, Dolores, because Michael specifically handpicked her to do so. This week, we also have football on our minds because, number one, NFL training camps are underway, including your Carolina Panthers, across the border at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, about a 90-minute drive down I-85 from Charlotte, maybe a little less. And number two, we are spending most of this week in Charlotte at the Atlantic Coast Conference's annual kickoff media event, with Commissioner Jim Phillips giving his State of the Conference address, all 14 head coaches and dozens of star players available for interviews and the preseason hype machine cranking up. Please check out our video, audio, interviews, and articles on those topics here on this new YouTube channel, our new DG Show podcast, and of course, our new website. Remember, that is ncsportsnetwork.com, launched within the last month. A lot of great feedback so far on our website. Today, we also have, as odd as it might sound, international soccer on our minds. I hope you are joining me in rooting for, and I'll bring in J.R. Quitman for this question. J.R., when I am speaking to the people of North Carolina, all I know is my head is in the screen. That beautiful beach scene with the hammock and the palm tree and the water and the sand, where I am mentally at all times, that's behind me. You can probably see, my mostly unshaven face. It's probably hard. Can you see what I'm wearing today where you are?
Just barely. Your name's blocking a little bit. Yeah, let's see it a little bit. What you got?
I got a puff.
USA. Yeah, nice.
See, you as a former football player have an actual chest to pump out. I'm a little bit of an older guy. I don't know if I have quite the chest that JR
you look good.
I'm going to try. So I'm wearing Team USA. Yeah, and right under that, I got the Nike swoosh. And there's a reason for that. You probably remember when Rod Brindamore was our guest, I wore a Hurricane shirt.
Yep.
When Chris Corciani was our guest, I wore kind of Wolfpack colors, not exactly, but he's a huge Phillies fan, as am I, Philadelphia Phillies. So I actually had a Phillies jersey on. I'm rooting for Team USA at the Women's World Cup right now. I've interviewed a lot of those amazing athletes, those amazing women in our community. Megan Rapinoe was an unbelievable guest here on the David Glenn Show years ago, and many others, Alex Morgan, etc. I'm a proud American. I love soccer. I once coached youth soccer. I know this year's event is on the other side of the world, so the game times are a little funky, but I'm wearing the Nike swoosh because we're going to talk about Michael Jordan and how he helped make it famous. But I'm wearing Team USA because whereas I am not good enough athletically to represent our great country in international competition, I am happy to support our teams, including right now the U.S. women's national soccer team at the Women's World Cup. Today, we are also going to travel to the international sports world, in part because I recently saw something in the sports world while on our family trip to Italy that I did not know existed. And I hope that you, the citizens and sports fans of North Carolina, will be as fascinated by what I saw as I was just a few weeks ago when I saw it in Italy. More on that crazy story in just a bit. First, a quick reminder from our friends at the North Carolina Pork Council, our founding sponsor here at the North Carolina News Network. No matter who your favorite team is, we can all agree that North Carolina is the barbecue capital of the world. The North Carolina Pork Council is proud to represent thousands of family farmers who responsibly produce the barbecue, bacon, and other pork products that are so well loved across North Carolina and around the world. Learn more at ncpork.org. That's ncpork.org. Okay, on to Michael Jordan, one of the greatest athletes of all time, one of the most famous athletes in the world to this day, and the centerpiece of one of the greatest sports marketing campaigns in American history. Here are a couple of quick fun facts as you get warmed up for why Michael Jordan is back in the headlines nationally and here in North Carolina just this week. Number one, listen to this. Thanks in part to signing Michael Jordan in 1984. When he turned pro as a UNC junior, and then remember, he infamously became the number 3 pick in the NBA draft that year. He was behind big man Hakeem Olajuwon of the University of Houston. I think he turned out pretty well. And then also Sam Bowie, the big guy at Kentucky, didn't turn out quite as well. MJ was selected, of course, number 3 by the Chicago Bulls, goes on to win all those championships and other accolades. From that signing by Nike through the Be Like Mike campaign, and more recently what they call the Jordan brand, it's kind of a subset of Nike's broader umbrella. Nike has gone from what was a struggling company in the mid-1980s to the world's largest athletic shoe and apparel company with almost $50 billion in sales revenue last year. I'm going to say that again. It's $50 billion with a B. For perspective, Nike's almost $50 billion in sales revenue last year, a chunk of that, of course, being Jordan brand revenue specifically. That almost $50 billion is more than twice the size of the number 2 athletic shoe and apparel company in the world. That's Adidas, born in Germany, roughly 20-some billion dollars last year. Nike's $50 billion is also, believe it or not, 7 to 10 times the annual revenue of very successful companies such as Puma or Under Armour here in our backyard, for example, meaning America, which also rank among the top 5 companies in the world in this same category. Michael was a huge reason Nike went from that struggling company in the mid-'80s to by far that number 1 company in that same category today. Number 2, fun fact. Michael Jordan's total NBA salaries, not endorsements, not off the court stuff. I'm talking about money paid to him in the form of salary by the Chicago Bulls for a long time, and then in those final seasons by the Washington Wizards. Michael's total NBA salaries over 16 NBA seasons added up to about $94 million. $94 million. Now, that's a lot of money, but consider the perspective. Believe it or not, 63 million of the 94 million Michael made as an NBA player in salary came in his final 2 seasons with the Bulls, because NBA salaries had skyrocketed by that point compared to what they were when he entered the league in the 1980s and even what they were in the earlier part of the 90s. Today, Steph Curry from the Davidson Wildcats right here in North Carolina. Steph with the Golden State Warriors has a contract that averages $54 million per season. Michael, over 16 years again, made $94 million. But weep not for Michael Jordan, of course. From Michael's Jordan brand alone, right now, shows you how much more he makes as a retired basketball player, as an endorser, if you will, rather than just as an athlete. Michael makes about $250 million every year just in Jordan brand royalties, based on that unprecedented 5% deal his mother helped to negotiate with Nike back in the mid-1980s. Agent David Falk had a hand in that as well. But if you watch the movie, it was Dolores Jordan who came up with what was a revolutionary idea back in 1984. In 2022, Nike made more than $5 billion with a B. Remember, $50 billion, the whole company, more than $5 billion just in Jordan brand sales. 5% of $5 billion is $250 million. And that's per year, and that's Michael Jordan's bottom line. His Jordan brand income alone every year is more than twice his entire salaries combined over 16 NBA seasons. If you like fun facts like that, if you like folks in sports media who can help you put things in perspective rather than blurring the lines, sometimes there are folks out there in the media who lie to you on purpose just to get you angry. We would never do that. We like to entertain. We like to inform. And those are just jump off the page fun facts regarding a guy from our state, Michael Jordan. This week, MJ is in the news for a different reason. He has sold the Charlotte Hornets, the NBA team, of course, right here in Charlotte, after 13 seasons as the franchise's majority owner. Official approval of the sale came down from the NBA's Board of Governors just a few days ago. In my eyes, Michael's sale raises an interesting question I want everybody to ponder today. Would you consider Michael Jordan's time as the majority owner of the Hornets a success over 13 years or a failure? Hear me out on this. I am fundamentally a glass half full guy on most topics. I see the bad in the world, but I like to celebrate the good in the world. In sports, I like to celebrate greatness, success stories in all their forms wherever I can find them. Contrast that with a somewhat popular alternative viewpoint that's out there. For example, the sports fans who will insist, especially when it's convenient to their argument that day, and perhaps only that day, that only the coaches or the players of the teams that truly finish number one, the Super Bowl champion, the NBA champion, the NCAA champion, the Stanley Cup champion, whatever, only number one can call themselves a success. Y'all know somebody like this. These folks will insist, usually when they're trying to attack a person or a team or a school or a viewpoint that they don't like, that everything else and everyone else is a failure. If that is your logic, okay. But two things. Number one, those same people often don't like to apply that measuring stick to their own favorite pro team or their own favorite college team. We call that hypocrisy, but the meatheads and the cavemen of the world usually can't see that. I hate to break it to you, buddy, but if you have to tell us that you're an alpha male in your social media profile, you're probably not one. Newsflash. Number two, that view of the sports universe automatically means, just to use one of our favorite sports contexts here in North Carolina, which I call the center of the college basketball universe, that logic means that only the NCAA men's basketball champions can call themselves a true success story. That automatically leaves 350 plus schools stuck with the failure label, I guess, according to this rationale. Again, I don't see it that way. If you finish first in your league in the regular season, if you win your conference tournament, if you, in some context, if you just get an NCAA bid, heck, there might be contexts where just earning an NIT bid, if your program was bad enough previously, would be a step in the right direction. Sweet 16 visits, virtually all Final Four trips. To me, they're success stories. In a broader context, I think year-over-year progress, maybe for a coach or a group that just was in bad circumstances but made them better. To me, also worth celebrating as a success story. For whatever reason, others, mostly the same sorts of people who say angry and hateful things on social media, they see success in a much more narrow way, which often makes me wonder if they've ever done anything themselves that they would deem a success according to their very narrow definition. Maybe not, probably not, but I digress. Back to Michael. Upon Michael Jordan's selling of the NBA Charlotte Hornets, is it really another awesome victory for MJ? When you see the sales price, you might call it that. Or is it more so a miserable failure that will always stain his mostly amazing resume? Meaning on the court results. Wait till you hear more about this. With MJ getting that official league approval this past Sunday for his sale of the Hornets, the NBA team that he has owned since 2010, that very basic question, awesome victory or miserable failure, is worth asking. And as odd as this might sound, the bottom line answer could be the one at either extreme, or maybe both answers are correct. It's one of those situations in life and in sports that depends entirely on your point of view. Jordan is now 60 years old. He has often said that his competitive fire and his will to win formed the foundation for his truly awesome success on and off the court. But competitively speaking, his 13 seasons with the Hornets as the majority owner, absolute disaster. And that is not an exaggeration. Michael was famously relegated, remember, as a young athlete to junior varsity status as a high school sophomore. That's a true story. Didn't make the varsity as a junior or as a sophomore at Wilmington Laney High School. He goes on, of course, because of that competitive fire, because he didn't like being relegated to the JV. He also grew a few inches, by the way. He goes on to become a high school All-American, McDonald's team, parade team, etc. in his latter high school days. And then he becomes an NCAA champion at UNC in 1982 under Dean Smith. He becomes a two-time consensus first-team All-American in 1983 and 1984. He becomes the National College Player of the Year as a junior in 84. And then he becomes that celebrated early NBA entry after those 3 years with Dean Smith and the North Carolina Tar Heels. In the NBA, of course, Jordan becomes arguably the GOAT. The GOAT. 99 out of 100 people knows that means the greatest of all time. GOAT. Get it? That's for the 100th person. MJ was a 6-time champion with the Chicago Bulls. 6-time finals most valuable player. That is the most ever in NBA history to this moment. 5-time league most valuable player. 14-time All-Star. 11-time All-NBA selection. 10-time scoring champion in the NBA. That's still the most ever. And a 9-time first-team All-Defense guy, showing that he could do it at both ends of the court at a really, really, really high level. Even 2 full decades after Michael's 2003 retirement as a player, he still holds the NBA's all-time career records for regular season scoring average, 30.1 points per game, and playoff scoring average, 33 plus points per game. From a strictly competitive standpoint, however, Jordan's decade plus, and that's his measuring stick, right? Wins and losses. He'll tell you those championships were more valuable than those points totals. Jordan's decade plus leading the Hornets as their majority owner was a complete and total embarrassment competitively. The Hornets' unofficial announcement just last month of the team's now official sale actually inspired a lot of reviews of the franchise's full history, which dates to 1988, first top-level pro franchise that we had here in North Carolina. And its time under Jordan, 2010 to here in 2023, neither synopsis allows for a pretty picture. Whereas the Panthers of the NFL have played in 2 Super Bowls after the 2003 and 2015 seasons, and the Carolina Hurricanes of the National Hockey League have won a Stanley Cup. That was in 2006. The Hornets/Bobcats, if you remember them, have never made it past the NBA's conference semifinals. They've never been to a Final Four, to steal a college phrase. And they haven't even won a single playoff series since 2002. If you are 21 years old or younger, you haven't been alive for a Hornets playoff series victory. That's embarrassing. On Michael Jordan's watch specifically, Charlotte made the playoffs only 2 times in 13 seasons, losing in the first round both times. And that's in a sport, remember, where more than half the teams, 16 out of 30, advance to the postseason each year. The bar is set in the lower place, and the Hornets were still 2 for 13 under Michael's watch. The Hornets' record during this same stretch, 13 years with Michael Jordan as the majority owner, was 423 wins and 600 losses. That is the 5th worst record in the NBA. And in this past season, the Hornets missed the playoffs for the 7th year in a row. That is one of the worst and longest playoff droughts in the entire NBA. In short, under Michael Jordan, the Charlotte Hornets were the dregs of the NBA. Not an exaggeration. Spoiler alert, the on the other hand aspect of this particular story is about as extreme a pivot as one can imagine. Just as the Air movie is celebrating Jordan's truly unprecedented levels of success with Nike as a businessman, the numbers behind his 2010 purchase of the Hornets and now his sale of the Hornets are truly staggering in a good way, as NBA Commissioner Adam Silver referenced during this year's NBA Championship Series. Incredibly, given the Hornets' relatively small market size, overwhelmingly poor on-court performances that I just described, and really their status as a long-term afterthought, whether you're measuring our state of North Carolina sports scene, where a lot of things have been more prominent than the Hornets in my 35 years covering this state, or even in the NBA media universe, the Hornets have been mostly an afterthought. They were really only relevant for a short period after they had Alonzo Mourning and Grandmama at the same time on the same team. They were pretty interesting back then. That's a brief blip in an otherwise poor tenure as one of the highest profile franchises at the pro level here in North Carolina. Given all that negative, small market size, lousy on the court, low attendance numbers in most years, afterthought status in the media universes, Michael Jordan is selling the Hornets, wait for it now, and this is word for word true, the 7th highest price for a sports team in history. That is number 7 in any sport, in any league, in any country, in the history of the world. Michael is getting $3 billion with a B for those Charlotte Hornets. All of the other highest priced teams, by the way, have come in relatively recent times. The Washington Commanders of the NFL, the Denver Broncos of the NFL. Commanders, $6 billion. Broncos, 4.6 something billion. Couple of NBA teams, several actually, for $3 to $4 billion have been sold in recent years. Chelsea, the Premier League soccer team, that franchise in English soccer, sold last year for $3.1 or $3.2 billion. The Charlotte Hornets are next on that list. Number 7 all time, any country, any era in the history of the world. By the way, Jordan's exact profit will be difficult to determine for several reasons. He's never owned 100% of the Hornets, so it's hard to calculate exactly what he's getting rid of. At times he's owned 90%, times 80%, at times different numbers. Number 2, Jordan is going to keep a minority stake in the Hornets. So whether it's 80 or 90 when he sold, he's going to keep some small number as a part owner, but no longer the decision maker, obviously, as he was when he was the majority owner. The exact percentage of MJ moving forward has not been made public, and that makes some of these specific calculations impossible. Finally, we know that Jordan purchased his majority share in the Hornets back when the total transaction price was $275 million. Now, again, the exact numbers are a little fuzzy because he never owned 100%, and he's not going to own 0%. But turning $275 million into $3 billion over a 13-year period with just a single investment vehicle, that is quite a feat. Clearly, anyone who wants to be like Mike will need significant financial acumen and great investment success to go along with his or her basketball prowess. Regardless of how those financial numbers and accounting details ultimately shake out, Michael Jordan clearly has maximized his 13-year Hornets investment, turning a truly legendary profit in the process, one of the largest percentage-wise, $275 million to $3 billion in the history of sports, in the history of the world. That certainly counts as yet another enormous financial win for Jordan, even as I would argue he closes the book on one of the worst competitive failures of his mostly extraordinary life and career. Moving on, we will have our weekly lightning round shortly. Rod Brindamore, Chris Corciani, they were both a lot of fun on those questions. And then a truly incredible story from the international sports world. 3 weeks ago, when we launched our new YouTube channel and DG Show podcast, we were coming at you from the Triangle. Last week, we visited the Wilmington area. That includes our stops in Southport, St. James, Oak Island, and of course, the Michael Franti concert at Greenfield Lake Amphitheater in Wilmington. My business partner, Mike Waddell, had breakfast and lunch at the original Saltworks in Wilmington, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Shout out to Bob Hubbard, our friend who's been running Saltworks for the last 20 years or so. He's a DG Show sponsor and a longtime DG Show supporter, which of course we appreciate. This week, we are spending most of our time in and around Charlotte, where our friends at Sport Clips have more than a dozen of their 70-plus statewide locations. My last haircut was at Sport Clips. Mike Waddell's last haircut was actually at Sport Clips. He even sent me the receipt. Even as I have figured out how easy it is and how classic, for example, the MVP treatment is, to manage my trips to Sport Clips, they've made it even easier. You can actually get in line while online at Sport Clips. Here's what I mean. You go to sportclips.com/check-in. You enter your city or zip code, and you select your preferred store. As you check in, you get an approximate time for your haircut. Again, I recommend the relaxing MVP with the shampoo, the hot or cold towel treatment, and then the neck shoulder rub. And that way you can head to the store at the smartest possible time. Sometimes at Sport Clips, they want you right away. But remember, at all Sport Clips, they welcome walk-ins. They don't ever take appointments. They're open every day of the week. Online check-in, though, saves you time by allowing you to secure your spot in the lineup even before you arrive at the store. It's that easy, that efficient, that awesome. The next time you're headed to Sport Clips, go to sportclips.com/check-in. So I'm going to call on JR here shortly because our recent lightning round with Rod Brindamore, for example, was brought to you by Jim Dorsett, Jody Hatley, the rest of our friends at XL Moving and Storage. Those guys are huge Caniacs. They run a great company. And if you want to support this new version of the North Carolina Sports Network or the DG Show, you'll choose XL for your moving and storage needs. They are an Allied Van Lines agent with offices in the Triangle and the Triad, and they offer that ideal combination. The reliable local company with 25 years of experience backed by the international firm's massive resources and state-of-the-art technology. XL Moving and Storage offers tailored, custom relocation solutions where they will do as much or as little as you want to fit your budget and your needs. Learn more today at xlms.com. That's EXCELMS.com. Our recent lightning round with Chris Corciani was brought to you by King Neptune Restaurant and Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach. The next time you're in the Wilmington area, and I've had viewers, listeners, and readers already telling me that they've taken me up on this offer and they are glad they did. If you're in the Wilmington area, please plan to have a weekend brunch or an insanely tasty dinner, best of the beach style, with our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife, Keaton. What they have done with that restaurant, how it looks after renovations, how delicious the food is. I know this myself from many trips there, how cool the people are, how perfect the vibe is, beach and otherwise. It's a sight to behold. Chris Corciani himself said he recently dined there and absolutely loved it. With those lightning rounds in mind, today's lightning round is with me. We talked about Michael. He wasn't available for a one-on-one as I had with him a long time ago. It is brought to you, this lightning round with DG, I guess we have to say, by our newest sponsor. And I'm excited to share that as we continue to grow at an amazing rate with our sponsors across the state of North Carolina. The Lawson Insurance Group, led by Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. These guys are actual brothers, as you might guess from their last name, operating a very successful family-operated business. Their office in Raleigh happens to be one of those beautiful blends of NC State grads and UNC grads and graduates and fans of supporters, both their clients and their staff of all the other colleges and universities, or as many as I can think of here across North Carolina. I know these guys personally. I trust these guys and have for truly decades. I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. And the next time you have insurance needs, I hope you will do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and more support for you as their client. As we speak, Miller Lawson is helping the Glenn family with our auto insurance needs. Michael Lawson is helping our North Carolina Sports Network with graphics and other things. And Ken Lawson is actually the guy to call if you run your own business or you have other commercial insurance needs. If you just Google High Street Lawson Insurance, their great website will be the first thing to pop up. The next time you need insurance, please call on our friends at the Lawson Insurance Group. All right, J.R. Quitman has the honor of asking the questions for this week's lightning round. JR was born and raised in Asheville, played football at NC State, meaning Raleigh, of course, and lives in the Wilmington area. So he's basically a perfect fit for the NC Sports Network, the statewide David Glenn Show, or even our upcoming Old North State Tailgate and Traveling Sports Circus, which I said correctly for the first time just then, which will travel to more than a dozen North Carolina cities this year, starting next month, meaning August. What parts of our great state, by the way, JR, have been graced with your presence lately? I know you get to be the questioner. I get to be Rod Brindamore, Chris Corciani, Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams. I'm on the receiving end this week. But remind us, I said those are 3 areas you represent. I think you've been to at least a couple more lately, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's funny you mentioned it because just yesterday we just got back from the Outer Banks up in Corolla, North Carolina. Yeah, we went up there.
My wife, the lovely and talented Maria, has done a lot of business out there and loves to visit. So that
was my first time.
You're truly a beach guy then, Outer Banks and the Wilmington area. No? So you're not on the beach, you're just at the coast.
Right. Just at the coast. Right. Exactly.
Respect. And then didn't you go to all WWE on me recently too in another road trip?
Oh yeah. Me and my son and I, we drove up to good old Raleigh and the old PNC Arena and saw WWE SmackDown up there 2 weeks ago, I believe. Yeah.
All right, what was the highlight? When I was a little kid, JR, I don't think I've ever told you this. You know the legendary Andre the Giant, who actually lived here in North Carolina for a long time? I kid you not. So how old is your son these days?
14.
Okay. I was a similar age. So you got to picture a little version of DG. I'm at the old Philadelphia Spectrum, which doesn't even exist anymore. And I hate to
I've
say
been
that
there.
because that makes me
Yep.
feel old.
Been
But
there.
Andre the Giant is coming down the aisle, and I have pretty good seats with my neighbor and his dad. I stick my hand out. I try to shake Andre the Giant's hand, and I swear to you, I am not exaggerating. The entirety of my hand, I don't have large hands. I don't have small hands. I'm just normal hand guy, right? I'm 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. Back then, I was a little smaller. But I swear to you, the entirety of my hand was swallowed by only the palm part
Just
of
the
Andre the
palm.
Giant's hand. So how do you shake hands with somebody whose palm is bigger than your hand? It's not physically possible. So you end up doing a high five. So what was the highlight? And those guys are massive today too. What was one of the highlights of your trip to PNC?
One of the highlights, honestly, and it's any of the wrestling fans, I'm sorry, wrestling fans. Wrestling is what you do for competitions in high school and college. Pro wrestling is the real deal.
I got you.
So I guess one of the highlights was if anybody's familiar with WWE and what's going on right now, Cody Rhodes, son of Dusty Rhodes, is back in WWE now. And he has a song where there's a particular part of the song where everybody in the crowd like goes, whoa, type deal. So the highlight of the show was just the joy on my son's face as we turned to each other and did the whoa part of the song with everybody in the crowd and everything. It was pretty cool. And we saw ourselves on TV because it was the WWE SmackDown.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, so you back when you got home and you're just watching that edition? Or
it was crazy because
cool.
Back later when we got home, but during the show, people texted us because there was a segment of the show where they sat a couple of the pro wrestlers in front of us and was doing a little segment during the wrestling match. So they had took a shot of them, and my son and I, we had great seats. We're friends with a wrestler. My wife and I grew up with a pro wrestler for WWE. So we were able to get pretty good seats and everything. So we sat right behind them. So when the camera shot came to them, my son and I were right behind them, and it was pretty cool.
By the way, JR, your university, NC State, will be very proud of your distinction between wrestling and wrestling because for a lot of my time covering sports in the state, NC State wrestling, the actual, Olympic style, I guess you'd call it, wrestling. They're one of the better programs in the entire country.
Not a doubt. No doubt.
So the distinction is appreciated, wrestling versus wrestling. All right, man, you get maybe one of these weeks, I'll turn these lightning rod questions on you. But he has the duties of turning them on me today. And you know how I have a hard time being brief. I'm really going to try to live by lightning round rules and keep my answers to, what do we say, 30 seconds per answer?
30 seconds, I think, or less. Yeah, something like that.
All right, lay it on me.
You ready?
Yep.
All right, place in the following order of your preference: beach house, lake house, mountain house.
All right, 30 seconds. Beach house, number one. Maria and I got married right there in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. My extended family has an amazing beach house in Avalon, New Jersey, and has had it for a long time. Number two, lake house. We've been as a family to both Lake Gaston and, maybe not as a family, that was me, Lake Norman near Charlotte. Love them both. Right. And third, just because, not because I don't love it. I love Boone. I love Asheville. I've rented mountain houses, love it. But just third, I guess, for mountain house because I love the first and the second so much.
Right. That's not too bad. Not too bad. All right. So all-time favorite family trip or trips outside of the United States?
All right. Everybody knows I just got back from Italy, but I have to say France is my number one. I love Europe. I love the wine there, the food there, the history there, the art there, the culture there. And actually, my second language is France. So when I visited France, I was able to be the rare American that could really try to communicate, not perfectly. Cool. I'm not fluent by any means, but it kind of enhanced my enjoyment of that great country. But Italy's on that list. London and the UK are on that list. Most of the Caribbean is on that list. You know, I'm a beach guy. Went to Jamaica last year. Virgin Islands, we have friends who live there. Hawaii's USA, so I can't count that, but I also love those islands. And 25 years ago, JR, the lovely and talented Maria and I honeymooned in what is called French Polynesia. It is about as far away on planet Earth as you can go. It would be like going west to Hawaii, which is a long, long, long way, and then going south to the southern hemisphere. And French Polynesia is like 100 islands. So Tahiti is a pretty well-known one. Bora Bora is a pretty well-known one. Yep. Another one's Moorea. And there's a bunch more. Like you're in these tiny speck islands in this massive Pacific Ocean, the South Pacific.
Man, that is beautiful.
So that's on my short list too. But man, I'm spoiled. I love Costa Rica. I love Mexico. I love Canada. It's a long list.
That's awesome. I've never been anywhere outside the U.S. yet. I hadn't been able to do that yet.
When I don't know if I left the United States until, gosh, maybe my mid-20s or later. I was a late bloomer when it comes to travel. But I hope that turns out to be your journey as well. All right, what's next?
You got time for another question?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I've heard you mention a couple of your musicians and stuff already, so we know a couple of those. I want to hear this. Any favorite actors or actresses, authors, or artists?
All right, yeah, you do know my bands: Michael Franti, AC/DC, Jimmy Buffett, Springsteen, Petty. Right. I love both Bob and Ziggy Marley, by the way. Zach Brown Band is another good one. But actor, I'm going to go with the late great Robin Williams. Man, my wife says she hasn't seen me cry in 25 years we've been together, but I tell you, I watch that guy's movies and I cry. It's the Jimmy V. Think and laugh and cry, and Robin Williams just gets me that way. So I miss him all the time. Actress, I'm going to go Cameron Diaz, Rachel McAdams, and Brooklyn Decker, who was actually a DG show guest. I'm afraid to think about what theme those three actresses have in common. I'll think it. I just won't say it out loud because I'm not sure that would be conducive to my health.
Exactly.
Author John Grisham. He's one of the greatest storytellers of our time, and obviously he and I both have that combination of writing and legal backgrounds. He just does it at an insanely high level. And, you know, I got a whole bunch of other artists, musicians that I love as well, but I'm going over my 30 seconds by a lot.
No worries. We have time for another one, you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go ahead and do the all right, let's go Eastern Bar. What do you think? What's your favorite? Eastern barbecue, Western barbecue, bacon, or any other pork product, considering NC Pork Council is our major sponsor for the show.
Well done, my friend. Got to get that in there. Our founding partner at ncpork.org. Exactly. I would actually be okay with all of the above, the way, you know, some SAT questions would give you that option, but that's probably not allowable under our rules. If I have to choose, I'm going with Eastern barbecue. I love the vinegar base, but I am happy with those other options. And it's funny, JR, when I grew up in Philly, a barbecue was actually a thing, meaning like an event, like you'd invite a person to a barbecue.
Right.
A barbecue also could be referred to as like the grill itself. Some people called the grill the barbecue. So, of course, 1987 and ever since, now I know what barbecue is.
Now you know what it is. Food. The official, you know what exactly it is, right?
And it's only the damn Yankees who keep using that term improperly. I'm allowed to say that because I am a transplanted Yankee. At some point, I have to call myself a North Carolinian. Barbecue is not an event. It is not a grill. It is a tasty food item. And for some people, frankly, it is a way of life.
Exactly.
All right, moving on. Nice. There is one last thing I promised at the top of today's show. A wild and crazy sport. JR, thanks for your help in that last segment. A wild and crazy sport I did not know existed, but I got to see on our family trip to Italy last month. I hope the platforms that we have allow us to venture beyond our North Carolina boundaries, of course, and sometimes even beyond our American boundaries, where usually there's a sports hook, but sometimes we just get to talk about life. And this is one of those occasions where life and sports overlap in a way that I'm almost speechless, which is hard for me, but I wanted to share with our audience back here in the good old USA. The Italians call this sport calcio storico, or others call it calcio fiorentino. It is a goal game, meaning the way to win is to get the object, in this case, it's a soccer ball, into your opponent's goal. Nothing unusual so far, right? This was created during the Italian Renaissance, though, supposedly back in the 1400s, and you're not going to believe where I'm going with this. It ain't soccer. There were even popes back in the 1400s who played this game in Vatican City. For centuries, it was actually considered a nobleman's game, played only by the most distinguished soldiers, princes, lords, and other noblemen of the time, centuries ago. Today, the same game is played by not only commoners, but sometimes actual criminals. I'll get to that in a minute. So in the goal-scoring sense, in this calcio storico, it's like soccer, or even in a way American football, part rugby, part hockey, you're shooting into the opponent's net, lacrosse, you're throwing the ball into your opponent's net, other sports that we're familiar with. Like the end zone in American football, the area you need to reach to score a goal in calcio storico, it runs the entire width of the field. So that's obviously a very wide net. Think, like an American football end zone. So here are some basics that won't sound too usual until I get to the punchline. What I lived in Italy a month ago. Or I should say, what I witnessed and learned about. I was not in the arena. A match time is about 50 minutes. That does not sound long until you hear about the rules, the more unusual rules. The field size is about 50 meters by 100 meters, 100 meters long, 50 meters wide. So not crazy different from what we would see in the NFL or college football. There's a white line that divides the field into two identical squares. And there's that entire width goal net that runs the width at each end of the field. On each team are 27 players, and they're all on the field to start the game. And they're all eligible to stay on the field the whole time. Get this, there are no substitutions, even if somebody breaks an arm and has to leave or violates one of the few rules that they have and gets ejected. No substitutions. You start with 27, and it usually ends with a lot less than that on each side. Most teams set up their 27 players with 4 goalkeepers. Remember, the field's very wide, so you have a lot to defend. 3 fullbacks, 4 halfbacks, and then there's 15 forwards. There's also a non-playing captain, or a coach, sometimes they call him, on each side. And he actually is situated in a tent kind of at the center of his defensive goals net, so he can yell at the players. These captains do not participate in the game, but they can organize their teams, coach them up. They even occasionally help the referees, mainly to minimize the possibility of absolute chaos, which is where I'm heading with this story. The officials. There is a referee, there are 6 linemen, and there's a commissioner. The commissioner sits above the field and steps into things only when things get way out of control. To score a point, you carry, throw, or kick the ball into the opponent's goal. Your opponent gets 1/2 point each time someone on your team kicks or throws the ball over the net. So a wild shot can give your opponent a 1/2 point. So you got to be somewhat precise as you're throwing or kicking the ball into your opponent's goal, or there's a drawback to being all over the place. After each goal, the teams switch sides. The prize back in the old days, and again, this is 700, 600 plus years old. The prize in the old days, the winning team got a prized cow, a little money, and a painted piece of fabric called a palio, which is a little bit like a flag, but not exactly. Everyone agrees now, though, that it's mostly about bragging rights. Why would these non-playing team captains have to be assigned the task of preventing absolute chaos? Well, here's the punchline. In this sport, not only are you allowed to fight, like, say, you might see 2 guys drop the gloves in a National Hockey League game, and then they get 5 minutes each in the penalty box. There are no penalties for most forms of fighting in this sport. So you're trying to move a ball, you're trying to pass it and kick it and throw it rugby style, but you can actually get into a fight without being penalized. In fact, one common tactic is to gain control of the ball, 27 versus 27. It is basically a soccer ball. Then you have your teammates wear down your opponents by brawling with them. Then you try to advance the ball toward your offensive goal because dudes are hurting, sometimes with broken limbs, bloody noses, etc. If you ever seen what they call a battle royale in pro wrestling, as JR correctly called it, where the guys are kind of paired off all over the ring, beating each other up, it's kind of like that, except there are no ropes, there's no squared circle, and there's no throwing each other over the top rope to eliminate each other from the battle royale. The brawls just keep going and going and going as teams are trying to work the ball down the field. And I'm not exaggerating here. Headbutting is allowed. Punching is allowed. And these guys, they can wear shirts. Most of them go bare-chested, so they're all sweaty and harder to tackle. But you're allowed to punch. You're allowed to headbutt your opponent. You're allowed to elbow your opponent. And get this, you're allowed to choke your opponent. These things are not only permitted, they're expected. While some rules have changed over the years, often in response to, participants actually dying during the match or as a result of injuries that lead to hospital stays, the basics have remained the same. Among the modern rules that have changed, they've banned sucker punches. So if JR and I were looking at each other and sort of engaging, we can punch each other square in the jaw. We can choke each other, elbow each other. It's like MMA, as long as we're one-on-one. Somebody can't come in from the side and blindside me or JR with a punch. So no sucker punches. Another thing that's been changed is that they now ban kicks directly to the head. Why? Well, because, people were dying. They've also banned double teaming a single opponent. So you can't attack an opponent 2-on-1 or 3-on-1. Again, it's got to be kind of mano a mano, as they say. So there are not a lot of rules to enforce, but any violation of these rules is not like a penalty, 2 minutes, 5 minutes in the box. You are expelled from the match. You are done for the day. And no, as you might guess, the ejected players do not always leave the playing field peacefully and in an organized manner. So get this. Starting in the year 2000, this is how chaotic this sport gets. Again, if you want to learn more about it, Calcio Storico. Calcio-Storico. I learned about this on my trip to Italy last month. Starting in the year 2000, this is where the chaos comes in. There have been 7 years where no champion was crowned at all. Why? Well, because of the COVID pandemic, in 1 year, they did cancel the 2020 event. However, 7 of the last 23 events started, but then were abandoned either because of security concerns on the field or in the stands, or both. Things have gotten so bad in some years that they have to change the rules. Like, the fighting is allowed, but some of those rules that I mentioned were being violated, and guys wouldn't stop fighting. The referees felt like they had lost control of the match and just had to cancel the rest of the tournament. Some of the rules changes because of this chaos. Again, 7 of 23 couldn't be completed because they were brawling so badly and out of control on the field or in the stands. The events organizers had to stop the recruitment of hardened criminals. So sometimes these games would get out of hand, and they had to make players with certain criminal convictions ineligible for competition because too many of the local teams thought the way to win was just find the nastiest ex-cons that they could. So no more certain criminal convictions. You're no longer eligible. At one point, they adopted a 40-year-old age limit in an attempt to reduce the number of fatalities, seriously, and serious injuries. And when teams started recruiting actual professional mixed martial artists from other countries and various parts of Italy, the organizers adopted a rule that stated that the participants had to be either born in the city of Florence, which is where this annual event is held, or they had to prove that they had lived there for 10 years or longer. In some years, they do allow a couple of ringers per team, but again, they've had to change those rules because the way teams were exploiting the rules, things were getting more and more violent, more and more out of control. Imagine if the Super Bowl had to be canceled 7 out of 23 times without declaring a winner because the referees lost control of what was happening on the field. I saw and learned about this event in the city of Florence. Now, this is a city famous for fashion. We're down there in the gold district, as they call it, the leather district, as they call it. Maria was pulled from the crowd to be the model, the supermodel, the lovely and talented, of course, for various leather products. So everybody's looking at me like, uh-oh, DG. Now Maria's wearing those beautiful things. How in the world is she not going to buy them? part of my reaction is, number one, Maria doesn't ask for my permission for anything. She wants to buy that, she's going to buy it. We don't live in this misogynistic world where she has to ask my permission for that stuff. But part of me is like, she also doesn't like that particular thing she's wearing. She's going to buy the gold and probably put it on my tab instead. Anyway, we're in Florence, right? Gold district, leather district, the surrounding beauty of a region called Tuscany. This is a ritzy, beautiful place. We're standing in what's called the Piazza Santa Croce in downtown Florence. The first documented match in that same square was in the year 1530. That is almost 500 years ago. I am standing in the same square where they started these crazy athletic battles 500 years ago. I saw how the arena was set up. I saw the temporary bleachers. Our visit there just happened to coincide with when this year's event was being held. Over here, around the same town square in Florence, Italy, there's a beautiful 14th century church. Over here is this towering, enormous marble statue of Dante Alighieri, the Italian poet and writer and philosopher who was born in Florence and wrote the Divine Comedy, remember, including the famous Dante's Inferno. He wrote that more than 700 years ago. So you got Dante peering down on you. You got beautiful columns and churches everywhere. And right in the middle of this very, very busy business district with gold here and leather there and Dante and marble over here and the churches over here, there's this temporary stadium. Chain link fences, temporary bleachers, and a rectangular field filled with sand. Remember, Florence is not on the coast. Sand is unusual there. Beautiful part of southern Italy called the Amalfi Coast, as you might guess, lots of sand. Naples is on the west coast of Italy, more sand. Venice is an Italian city literally on the water. Not much sand, actually, but on the coast, surrounded by water. Florence is inland, surrounded by the Tuscan countryside. So the sight of sand is unusual. This is definitely not a league, by the way. What I am describing to you, Calcio Storico, is barely even an organization. These players do not make a living in Calcio Storico. There are only 3 matches per year. It'd be like if the Super Bowl bracket just started with the AFC Championship game and the NFC Championship game. There was no regular season. There were no wild card matches. They're starting with a Final Four. That's how it works with this violent, crazy, I can't believe it exists sport that still does exist here in 2023 in Italy. There are only those 3 matches per year. They happen to be held in the latter half of June every year, which happened to be when the Glens were visiting Italy this year. There's the 2 semifinals. There's the championship match between the semifinal winners. The city of Florence historically has been divided into quarters. So these teams are not from all over Italy. They are from the 4 quarters of Florence. Santa Croce is called the Azzurri, the Blues. Santa Maria Novella is called the Rossi, the Reds. Santo Spirito is the Bianchi, the Whites. And San Giovanni is called Verde, the Greens. The Greens almost never win. Interest in this sport waned in Italy for centuries. Not much documentation of it in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s. But wait for this. It was brought back in 1930, so almost 100 years ago, by none other than the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Given the violence, the blood, the broken bones, and the overall nastiness of this particular sport, not at all surprising that it was Mussolini who brought it back. Seriously, in 1930, officially brought back this crazy sport. The sport of Calcio Storico was profiled in a 2008 Sports Illustrated magazine and website article entitled Balls and Blood. But beyond some Italian media, which is a language where I only know a few dozen words, and it's a language I certainly can't read, there isn't a whole lot else out there on this topic. I saw something in SI, something on National Geographic, and that's about it. If I had not seen Calcio Storico with my own eyes, I am not sure I would have believed that it still exists here in 2023. JR, I don't think we have time for viewer email today, do we? I know we get a bunch of that stuff, but we also
be close. I mean,
before we get into it. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, be close. We got a couple more minutes left if you want to get it in there.
All right, let's tackle one email
just
if you
one
have
of
it
them
from
real
this
quick.
week's inbox. Go ahead.
And
by the way, folks can write to us at davidglennshow@gmail.com. That comes to me whether you want to sponsor the show, you have an idea, you have feedback, davidglennshow@gmail.com. That's one of many email addresses that come to me. And we've gotten a lot. We just don't always have a lot of time during these hour-long podcasts to get answers on the air. Go ahead, JR.
All right, I'm going to just randomly click this one from Greg M. from Matthews, North Carolina. DG, for many years, I listened to your statewide show here in Charlotte on 2 different stations, I think, and I've really missed it over the last 2 years. I still enjoy your visits as a regular guest with Mac and T-Bone on WFNZ.
Love those guys.
My question today is this. As much as I like you as a host and your great interviews, I also loved, in capital letters, loved the Blues Brothers music you played to start the show, and a lot of the other stuff you used coming back from commercial breaks. I love the new show, but what have you done with those classic tunes? Thank you,
JR. You know, it's funny, man. I practiced law for 17 years here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I know about, obviously, trademarks and other intellectual property royalties for music and, NFL logos or NC State logo. You got to pay to use those logos, right? So you can't just steal music and use it however you want. In certain contexts, there's royalties involved. You might have known this before I did. But whereas there's something called fair use of music, so if you use a relatively small clip of a song, the way we did, he's what he means by bump music, of course, for those who don't know that term. We're coming back from a commercial, and before you hear me say my first words, you're going to hear a song. You're only going to hear probably 10 seconds of that song, but it just ramps us back into the next part of the conversation or the next interview or whatever. So in the radio context, it's called fair use. You're only using 10 seconds. You don't have to pay a royalty for that song in some contexts. What YouTube and some other formats do is that they actually have algorithms that if you attempted to use even 10 seconds of a song without paying that artist a royalty, and JR and I completed this hour-long podcast, they'll zap it from your YouTube presentation or your podcast presentation. They'll just zap the song out because they have algorithms making sure you don't inappropriately use things without compensating the artists. That's a semi-long way of saying that, sadly, on YouTube and some other platforms, it's not as simple as the fair use was. So you have to be more careful with what music you use to start the show. I used a really popular Blues Brothers song called Everybody Needs Somebody to Love to start every show I did for maybe almost 20 years. And people loved it. It's a great high-energy song. Call it up yourself. Everybody Needs Somebody to Love. I can't play it for you right now because YouTube would zap it out before you received or you had access to this YouTube channel post or this podcast edition. So I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the compliments. Thank you for listening to me for part of that time. I was on in Charlotte with our statewide show. I do love Mac and T-Bone to this day. I'm still a guest for a lot of other podcasters, terrestrial sports radio hosts, AM and FM sports radio hosts, and those guys are on my long list of favorites, along with a guy like Josh Graham in the Triad part of our state. I love the guys at Pirate Radio in the Greenville part of our state. I try to say yes to everybody when I get invited. I do a lot of shows in Virginia and South Carolina, Syracuse, Louisville, other ACC cities as well. But I always try to take care of those here in North Carolina who, in some cases, I think I've been a guest on WFNZ in Charlotte since that station was created in the mid-1990s. FNZ was the first 24-hour AM/FM sports radio station created in our state ever. The old 850 The Buzz came along a little bit later in Raleigh, and of course 99.9 The Fan nowadays. But yeah, that world has changed dramatically. If you saw the first edition of this rebooted David Glenn show, I went into some of the details of how the audio world has been dramatically reshaped. One of the only things I don't like about the YouTube/podcast form we're doing now is I just don't have the same kind of flexibility with my bump music, my intro music, and some other things. The positives far, far outweigh the negatives. But JR, thank you for that, for reading that email, and thanks to the viewer for sending it along. Last thing is our weekly reminder. Please subscribe to that official YouTube channel. Please subscribe or follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well. Here at the North Carolina Sports Network, the handle is at the NC Sports Net. So social media at THE NC Sports Net. For me personally, it's at David Glenn Show, but those NCSN handles at the NC Sports Net. Appreciate JR for putting that up on the screen. When you subscribe to our YouTube channel, and remember, it's free. I know I say that a lot, but it's just essential to our business model. It's free. It's as easy as clicking the subscribe button next to this video box where you're seeing me right now. So whereas we thank the folks at the NC Port Council, all of our other sponsors, without you, we would not exist in this form, period. Not an exaggeration. Without you, this would not be happening right now. We're also asking everybody else who may not be able to sponsor us financially. You can sponsor us by getting your insurance through Lawson Insurance Group, by eating at the Original Salt Works in Wilmington, or having dinner at King Neptune, Wrightsville Beach, or having a beer with me at Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach, getting your haircut at Sport Clips. Like, seriously, handling your moving and storage needs with our friends at XL Moving and Storage. These are the things we need to be the success that we want to be. And again, this first month or so has been way, way beyond our expectations in virtually every category. So we thank you for that. But we need your help on these other things, even if you're not reaching into your pocket financially. Subscribe, follow, listen, read. NCSportsNetwork.com, again, is our brand new website. And if you do subscribe, if you do those things, you're automatically eligible for very cool prizes, including free tickets to upcoming college and pro sporting events, free concert tickets you can attend with or without me. We saw Michael Franti with 2 viewers because that was their choice. They didn't want to wait for football season to begin. Free rounds of golf, again, with or without me. Free dinners at some of North Carolina's best restaurants, again, with or without me. Not just King Neptune and Wrightsville Beach, but a lot of others across the great state of North Carolina, including some more that we'll be able to announce soon as official show sponsors. Okay, that'll do it for today's edition of the program. The David Glenn Show is an exclusive production of the North Carolina Sports Network. Executive producer, Mike Waddell. Technical director, the one and only J.R. Quitman. The founding partner of NCSN is the North Carolina Port Council. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks for spending some time with us today. We look forward to seeing you again next week.